Everybody, and we will continue with the program. I have the pleasure to introduce to you Tariq Zaidi. He's a freelance photographer currently based out of London, UK. His photography focuses on documenting social issues, inequality, and traditions and endangered communities around the world. Tariq self-assigns, funds, research, and writes his own work. His photo has been featured on television and internationally over 950 publications in more than 90 countries. Named as one of the top 10 travel portrait photographers you should know by the International Photography Award, IPA, focusing on social issues and inequality within various societies across the globe. In 2019, he was nominated for Prix Pictet. His first book, Sapeurs, Ladies and Gentlemen of the Congo, published in September 2020, was selected by Vogue as one of the best fashion books of the year 2020. He has taught courses at the prestigious Central St. Martin's at London College of Communication, University of the Arts in London, and other photographic institutions in the UK. He's here with us to talk about his work and to teach us what photography is about. Tariq Zaidi.
Thank you so much, Lars. Assalamu alaikum and ahlan wa sahlan. A very good afternoon to everybody. I'm very honored to be presenting today at Exposure International Photography Festival. Thank you for having me here today. So, my name is Tariq Zaidi. For most of my life, I used to work in an events and training business. And after many years of doing this, in 2014, I quit. I wanted to become a photographer, pursue my passion of capturing the dignity, strength, and soul of people within their environment. I had to learn the trade. I'd never been a photographer before, and I wanted to specifically focus on documenting social issues, inequality, traditions, and endangered communities around the world. My images and stories are a window in the experience that I have had and I wanted to share with a wider audience. The themes I'll talk about today focus on people in challenging environments, and basically I want to shed a light on worlds others don't usually get to see. By September 2014, I was on my way to do my first story, which was on the eagle hunters in Western Mongolia, the Kazakh eagle hunters. For me, it's one of the most fascinating and primal connections between man and animal. It's only practiced by a handful of Kurds and Kazakhs. It's been around for almost 4,000 years in Central Asia. And for Kazakhs, it's one of the highest expressions of their cultural heritage. There are only about 70 traditional eagle hunters left in the world. And for them, it's not just an important tradition or an extraordinary sport, it's their reason to live. They are nomads and herders. They have lots of sheep, goats, and basically they move up and down the valley depending on the season. There are lots of foxes and wolves around, and they use the eagles to hunt foxes and wolves, even wolves, which are huge. And they use the foxes' fur to keep them warm in minus 30 to minus 60 degree temperature in their winters. This young lady, she's 13 when I took this picture. Her name is Aishulpan. She's an eagle huntress, one of the few, and I think they even made a film about her called The Eagle Huntress. My first story was reasonably well received and gave me the confidence and, importantly, funding to continue my work. The second project I did was in Lalibela, Ethiopia. And here, I'd been there many times before, but never with the camera. And I wanted to go back and just show the world or a larger audience what an amazing place this is. There are 11 intricate churches there, hand-chiseled out of the red volcanic rock. They've been around for nearly 900 years. It's an astonishing place of spirituality and humanity. And I don't think there's anything like it in the world. In Ethiopia, 2/3 of the population is Christian, and Lalibela is almost as important as Jerusalem. It also happens to be one of the first places that was a UNESCO heritage site. There's a lot of metaphorical imagery going on as well, moving from darkness to light. The churches are intertwined with tunnels, and it gives the pilgrims the image of going from heaven to hell or hell to heaven, hopefully. Another short story I did was on searching for love in the deserts of Chad. It's about the Wadabe Nomads. And these nomads, they basically move their cattle from Cameroon to Chad to Niger to Nigeria. And despite the harshness of the environment, it's beauty that the Wadabe prize above everything else. Once a year, the men put on elaborate costumes, paint their faces in with makeup, and dance for hours. Actually, it's roughly 4 days in the hope of finding love. It's an unlikely place to be obsessed with aesthetics, but when the rainy season ends, everybody comes together and they celebrate the Garawal. It's a week-long courtship ceremony, and it's one of the few, to my knowledge, it's one of the few African cultures which allows the women to choose their betrothed. This is the final short story I'm going to talk about, and it's about the Mundari people of South Sudan. The Mundari are basically cattle herders. The interesting thing about them, apart from their remarkable animals, are that each year about 350,000 animals are stolen, and almost 3,000 people are killed by cattle rustlers. The animals for the Mundari are everything. It's wealth, status, sustenance, and dowry. The breed of these animals is called the Ankole Watsui, and they're also known as the cattle of kings. With a single bull or a single cow worth up to $500, it's not surprising that the Mundari men stand over with their rifles, and basically they will do anything to protect their animals. I'd asked my translator to ask some of the Mundari tribesmen to take a picture with their families. And he just looked at me and he said, no. The cows are more important than our family. So they all came up and wanted a picture with their favorite cow rather than their wife or their children. Something I found rather amusing. This man is just sleeping. The ground he's on is like talcum powder. It's actually burnt dung from the animals. And it's burnt at night to keep the mosquitoes away, but when it dissolves, they use this ash to wipe down the animals, and it gets rid of the ticks. It's also so soft that they put it on their own bodies to keep away any ticks and mosquitoes at night. And he's lying next to the fire. It's really warm and comfortable. So he's just taking a little bit of a nap here. So just have a feel for what this environment's like.
Chambala, Lugano Gai. Oh, the Nijuala Chambala, Lugano Gai. Tonoman no Mokana. Got a Nijuala Chambala, Lugano Gai. I go a villa, Bangadi Jona, Iredo. God, Jelly, Mamma, La Caponga Don. Here, Gajo Boron Gagdono. Gajo Boron Gagdono. Hello, Kuchana looking.
Okay, so between 2014 and 2016, I published around 8 or 9 short stories, but I wanted, as a photographer, I wanted to dig deeper, push myself. In 2017, I made a very conscious decision to start working on longer term work. The projects would last anywhere between 3 and 10 years, while I continued my shorter trips to fund the longer term work. The 4 projects I started at the same time in 2017 were Sapeurs of the Congo, we'll talk about that in detail, the impact of gang violence in El Salvador, again, that's something I'm going to talk about today, and 2 other projects which we can't do today, which are capturing the human spirit, and that's effectively a visual anthology about hope, dignity, and community in some of the poorest regions in the world, and daily life in North Korea. So, Sapeurs of the Congo. How did this project come about? I'd done a few stories in Africa, Chad, Angola, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and probably traveled to about 30 countries in Africa, almost 3 years of traveling around Africa. I wanted to find the story away from what you regularly see in the news about Africa, famine, floods, poverty, and war. And I was also searching for a story which encompasses what I had seen and felt across my travels in Africa. The words that come to mind are color, innovation, ingenuity, creativity, dreams, hopes, struggles of daily life, joie de vivre, and how Africans defy their circumstance, in this case, using fashion. So what is Sape, or Sapeurs, and where did it come from? The key word here is colonialism. It's actually a fashion culture that originated as a response to colonial powers in Congo Brazzaville and Congo Kinshasa. La Sape, S-A-P-E, is an acronym is an acronym. It stands for Société des Ambianceurs et des Personnes Élégantes, Society of Ambiance-Makers and Elegant People. And it's also a play, it's a slang word in French which means dress up. It was a way for young Congolese men to adopt an elegant dandy style of their colonizers and make it themselves. And obviously the culture stands in stark contrast to the crushing poverty of the area where the Sapeurs support their elaborate clothes in defiance of their circumstances. The earliest photographic representation is in the 1920s, where young men sought to adopt and imitate the French and Belgian clothes as a way of combating colonial superiority. After independence in the 1960s, many Congolese traveled to Paris and London and returned with designer clothes. By the 1970s, they took on a much more rock star persona with entourage and dressed in suits, and many photographers have visited Congo making their own photographs, each, as in all art, with their own unique interpretation of their vibrant culture. So we're going to meet some of the Sapeurs. This is Maxim in Congo, Brazzaville. He actually designs his own clothes. So apart from his shoes, his tie, his shirt, his glasses, and his watch, he's designed everything in Congo colors. He's very proud to be Congolese. And he went to a tailor and had his clothes made. Basile, very French style. Again, you'll see the difference, or I'll show you the difference between Brazzaville and Kinshasa, the two different Congos in a minute. Yamea, and Cass, Adzo, he's a taxi driver. The shot was taken right in front of his house. You just get a feel for the environment that they live in, and I'll also talk about how they save up for their clothes. So my approach with this whole project was specifically to meet the Sapeurs and their families inside the slum communities, just the slum communities where they live, and only take pictures within 500 meters of where they live in their low-income communities, and try and show as much of Congo daily life as possible in the pictures. I also wanted to document every single item of clothing they were wearing, and we would do that before we went out. And I wanted to show the difference between the style in Brazzaville and Kinshasa, and try and capture the essence of Sape. Color, joie de vivre, the joy they bring to their communities, and the way they use fashion to defy their circumstances. If you notice in this image, on his coat, he's wearing, he's got a label on his coat. Fake clothes don't cut it in the Sape world. Everything needs to be original, a Gucci, Pierre Cardin, or designer labels. My aim with this work is to highlight the importance Sape plays specifically in the defiance of circumstances through the stark contrast of the elegance of their dress against the harsh backdrop of their surroundings. Congolese people are very well known all over Africa for taking pride in their appearance, yet Sape takes the art of looking good to the next level. Sape families are treated like celebrities. They do bring hope and joy, joie de vivre, to their communities, which have been ravaged for years by violence and conflict. Just to put things into perspective, spending money on silk socks or Pierre Cardin shirt, where 70% of the population live in poverty, doesn't make a lot of sense. But the Sape aim is to do more than help people forget about their troubles. It has become a subtle form of social activism, a way of turning tables on power and rebelling against the economic conditions they live in. Sapeurs of all ages still gather together to dance. They have friendly fashion face-offs. They compete against each other to see who's the best dressed. They're treated with respect, and they're seen as a vital and life-affirming part of the Congolese cultural heritage. This lady is actually a policewoman in her normal life. We were just about to go out. It started raining, and she didn't bother to take down the umbrella. She just sat there in her living room, a bit dejected, and we waited until the rains passed. This gentleman's name is Celestin. Everybody calls him Moses. And when he's a sapper, he carries around his staff. And again, this is in front of his neighbor. You can see the joy he brings to people. True sapology is about much more than expensive labels. The true art lies in a sapper's ability to put together an elegant look specifically unique to their personality. They spend a tremendous amount of time trying to find the right accessories for their look. On the left of the picture, that umbrella was imported from Japan. It's a samurai sword, but it's actually an umbrella. The one on the right is carved in Congo. I can't remember where he got his traffic lights from, but everybody has their own personality. The La Sape's global following is growing, thanks to its exuberance and freedom of expression. It's going to be very interesting to see where the next generation of sapeurs take the movement. As a Sape favorite, Yves Saint Laurent famously said, "Fashions fade, style is eternal." This young boy, his name is Okili. This is just after his school. He couldn't wait to leave school. His friends were waiting outside his home, and he dressed up. Again, very, very proud to be Congolese. His skirt is made out of ties. Each tie is, again, a Gucci, Pierre Cardin, or some other label. But the colors he's wearing, again, Congolese, very, very proud. If you look at his friends from his class or his classmates at the back, nobody is wearing shoes, just flip-flops and barefoot. But they still treat him like a celebrity, and he brings joy in this case, to his school. Though the subcultures traditionally passed down the male line, many Congolese women also are wearing designer suits and becoming sapeurs. And obviously here you can see some mini sapeurs. Their grandmother is a sapeuse, and that's why they wanted to become sapeurs. This is their grandmother. Most have ordinary jobs. The before and after look. Most have ordinary jobs as policemen, taxi drivers, tailors, housewives, but as soon as they clock off, they transform themselves into these debonair dandies. Many save up for years, borrow huge sums of money to fund their lavish wardrobes. They also share clothes to maintain their appearance, and some have pieces made by local tailors as well. Over the course of 3 years, I think I met and interviewed about 200 different sapeurs, and I photographed about 150. There are probably about 80 in my book. I just want to give you a feel of what it feels like to work in this environment. So here we go, short video.
Allez, ok.
Ok, Christophe. Changez rapidement, changez de position. Et Nathan, regarde à moi. Back. That's like about an hour. Just been taking a picture of Sapeurs. 1 hour in Congo is like this. And like this. Must be about 35 degrees. It must be about 35 degrees, about 50%, maybe 60% humidity. It's going to rain. And this is what the life of a photographer is. This is what it feels like. It is fantastic. I love being here. Avec Papa Wamba. Il y avait combien de gens?
Depuis 2016.
2016.
Avant sa mort, il était ici.
Vous avez combien de temps de sapeurs?
Ça fait 8 ans.
8 ans.
Oui.
Okay. In Brazzaville, Congo Brazzaville, La Sape is mainly French style and exquisite suits. But now we're in Kinshasa. Kinshasa, anything goes from Japanese Yamamoto coats to Scottish kilts. Also, to put things into perspective, Brazzaville has a population of about 1.8 million. Kinshasa, 15 million. I think it's the largest city in Africa. And literally everything goes. This image here is not a rubbish bin. It's actually the street in the slum community. And the gentleman's home is about 100 meters from here. So he's standing in the street, but that's what makes Sape unique and how they use fashion to defy their circumstances. There are many sapeurs. This young boy is Ibarra. I think he's 5 years old. His father is a famous sapeur, and the little guy just wanted to be a sapeur like his dad. So it's his style. His father dresses very, very differently. He's lovely. And just a reminder, this is somebody's, pretty much the whole home in the slum community. But everything underneath the blanket, or the sheet, they're all clothes in plastic bags, and those four suits are his favorite. My final words about the Sapeurs, we're going to watch a quick video of them talking about themselves, but my final words are, being a Sapeur is about clothes, yes, but it's also about an attitude and a way of being in the world. It's telling the world that no matter what my environment is, I am still human, I can still have dreams, aspirations, and I can look pretty amazing if I want. Sapeurs are treated as rock stars in the community because they defy their circumstances. And it's about asserting yourself boldly in the world. Let's hear what they have to say about themselves.
makasi bana poto jika ye inspecteur bilamba nakoya mabe donc Japon bomona donc.
Là, je vais démontrer ce qu'on appelle équilibrer une équation de couleurs vestimentaires à deux inconnus ou trois inconnus. Kenzo, made in Italian. La cravate en bleu, blanc, rouge, regardez vous-même, c'est du Pierre Cardin. Bon, je vais porter, ça j'appelle ça, c'est une paire tectonique en John Foster.
Football, par exemple, on aime quelque chose, soit par exemple, je supporte le Real, il ne peut pas me manquer un match du Real, ou soit du Barça. Donc la Sape aussi, c'est comme ça. C'est comme quelqu'un qui est malade, une maladie incurable, donc à chaque fois, il faut prendre les médicaments. Voilà, la Sape, c'est comme ça.
Moi, la Sape, c'est la joie, c'est la paix, c'est le bien-être. Hein? C'est se sentir à l'aise.
Okay, now we're going to talk about a slightly darker subject. This is the second body of work that I've completed. In 2020, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, interviewed migrants and refugees fleeing Central America. 62% experienced violence before their departure. Here, I present images from El Salvador, the gang violence, and its impact on society from 2018 to 2020, when the country underwent a period of a great political change. They reveal how El Salvador has become a uniquely dystopian society, forcing thousands to migrate in hope for a safer life elsewhere. This image is taken inside a forensic criminologist's office of different graves and murder sites, showing some of the bodies that he's uncovered. The reason I started the project in 2017 is I had lived in Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina for around 4 years, and for almost a further 3 years traveled across most of North, Central, and South America. And the following had a visceral impact on me. When then President Trump was calling Central Americans migrant caravans, criminals and the like, I wanted to explore what kind of life these people were leaving behind. I wanted to show the world just how dystopian El Salvador had become and the extent, scale, and savagery of violence, which is unlike anything most of us have ever known. People talk and write about violence in El Salvador. I felt it was necessary to photo document it. The breakdown of social norms exacerbates the situation. Young people grow up in warlike conditions and are often socialized through and into gangs. The ubiquity of violence is devastating to normal psychological development. When you talk to families who have experienced this violence, murders, disappearances, extortion, death threats, you understand that most people live out their days in fear. Every project has its challenges. By far the greatest challenge in this project for me, or this body of work, was gaining the trust of anybody and getting a team of local experts, journalists, and fixers in El Salvador who would spend months writing on my behalf to government authorities to try and get access. My travel dates were usually linked to when there was a chance of getting access, which was sometimes revoked at the last minute. Obviously, safety and security were also a big concern. And beating the police to murder sites often meant coming across people who may well have been gang members. The reason I focused on El Salvador specifically is it highlighted the issues around gang violence more strongly. In 13 of the 22 years between 1995 and 2017, again, 13 of the 22 years, El Salvador held the highest murder rate of any country not in a war zone. Kill, rape, control is the motto of the notorious Mara Salvatrucha MS-13 gang. The street gang, along with its rival Barrio or La 18, La 18, has become infamous across Central and North America for its brutal violence and iron grip on communities. Level of violence has varied, but again, as I just mentioned, the country's murder rate has been consistently highest amongst the world. The savagery of the violence, often using machetes and satanic and occult references, has shocked and paralyzed the country. The state has responded by cracking down hard on prisons and gang members. The government has a no-tolerance policy, which is largely popular, but it has been criticized by a number of human rights observers as being too harsh. The President Bukele, who came into power in 2019, has achieved significant success, bringing down murder rates consistently. However, an explosion of violence in early 2020, when the street gangs killed almost 80 people in just 4 days, illustrates how volatile the country still is. When entering an unfamiliar neighborhood, drivers fearing violence take precautions, flash their lights, roll down their windows to indicate allegiance to a particular gang that controls it. And society is gripped by pervasive fear, violence, intimidation, and thousands of Salvadorans flee their homes in search for a safer life, usually to Mexico or to the United States. This shot is taken inside the prison. El Salvador is no stranger to violence. It's endured a brutal civil war in the 80s, which lasted almost 10 years. I'm sure there are many photographers here who documented that. The war was notorious for its brutal violence and human rights, and created refugees who went up to the US and can be traced to the origins of the two main gangs, MS-13 and Barrio 18. Both gangs were formed in LA by Salvadoran teenagers attempting to protect themselves against other established gangs in the city. Many of these young people served jail time for non-violent crimes, and I think it was 1997 when US policies hardened and many Salvadoran refugees were sent back to El Salvador and established branches of the gang, gradually beginning to gain deeper control in the country and undermining the foundations of a fragile and struggling state. Sorry, just one sec. The control that the gangs have in El Salvador reaches to the neighborhood level and often makes travel impossible. Even politicians have admitted to pay to enter certain neighborhoods. The main way gangs maintain local control is by extortion and economic blackmail. It's estimated that MS-13 alone extorts 70% of all Salvadoran businesses. That's multi-million-dollar revenue, generating roughly $30 million that people can calculate. The massive scale of revenue means that these gangs now resemble multinational companies. They've started to invest in property, small businesses, stealing and reselling cars, drug trafficking. Gang presence is at all levels of daily life, and it presents huge challenges for law enforcement. Most police officers and law enforcement officers wear balaclavas to protect themselves and the identity of their families. But they're the ones who are most targeted by gangs. It's estimated that 500,000 Salvadorans are involved with the gangs, either through direct participation or coercion and extortion. Gang members themselves are around 60,000, compared to the Salvadoran paramilitary forces, state officers, and the police, which are only about 50,000. And prisons, as you could see in the previous shots, are a breaking point, almost 200% of capacity. The country, amazingly, has the second highest per capita prison population after the US. According to the former Minister of Justice and Security, 80% of the executions and violent crimes are actually ordered directly from the gang leaders in the prisons. The kind of violence that MS-13 and Barrio 18 partake is brutal and terrifying. It is common for members to use machetes, to hack off limbs, and document their killings on telephones, clips of which they share amongst each other. But there is a method to this madness. The body parts are spread and buried in different clandestine graves, so no complete body is ever found, and therefore the murder is not recorded. If the victim remains disappeared, rather than a murder statistic, there's less chance of a government crackdown on the gangs. And once you're in a gang, it's almost impossible to leave. It's easier to kill a gang member than run the risk of them becoming an informant. Unlike other global extortion organizations like the Japanese Yakuza or the Italian Camorra, El Salvador gangs resemble internationally franchised street gangs more than centrally led organizations. As an example, local chapters, or cliques they're called, operate largely independently, and even rival chapters of the same gang are often fighting or killing each other. In 2021, there was an estimated 250 cliques in El Salvador, all operating at the local neighborhood level. The police are always on high alert, as I said, wearing balaclavas, but the attacks on the police are common, and they include something that's called a double tap murder, which is somebody has been murdered, the police turn up, and then they start shooting again on the new police who've come to pick up the first body. That's a double tap shooting. Disappearances are common for the reasons I explained, and it's actually not recommended to follow up with the police. Informers and molds are everywhere. If a body is found, burials are held as quickly as possible. Funerals are held quietly because they, as well, are targeted for repeat murders. This breakdown of trust has created a uniquely problematic socio-political situation and helps explain why for so many Salvadorians, the only answer is migration, usually up north to Mexico and the US. Nearly 30 years of state failure and gang violence has created a situation unlike any other in the world, with a persistently high murder rate and culture of paranoia. While other countries suffer as a result of gang violence, the kind that's developed in El Salvador with its Satanism, brutality, and relentlessness is unique. Just going to show you a short video clip. My hope with this work is to amplify the voices of those Salvadorians who fight for basic human rights, security, and a safer life for their children and families. Thank you so much for listening.